Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe. Now introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Caines, and Ed Mann.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Three Devs and a Maybe. My name's Ed Mann, and today we're very lucky to be joined by returning guest, fellow My Builder, Neal Brooks. How you doing, Neal?
Hi, Ed. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, sir. And we're also joined by Nicolas Grekas. How you doing, Nicolas?
Good. Hi, everyone.
Hey, great to have you on the show, man. For the audience, we actually met Nicolas in person when we did the Symfony Live meetup in London, and Neal was, I wouldn't say harassing him, but politely asking him, "Would you come on, on the show?" And politely, Nicolas has said yes, and it's great to have Neal back on the show. So yeah, it's going to be a good chat about Symfony and whatnot. Would you mind actually introducing yourself, Nicolas, to the audience?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Nicolas Grekas. I work in Paris for Symfony, actually. I used to work for Sensei Labs, but now we split the company, so I work for Symfony. I'm a PHP developer. I'm engaged in the core team of Symfony since like 5 years. And I'm lucky enough to be able to work on Symfony, the open source code base, almost daily. So yeah, I try to improve the state of, the art in the PHP ecosystem and the Symfony especially.
Actually, Nicolas, would you just give us a quick description on how you first learned program, what got you into your career choice, and give us any important milestones that have led up to where you are now?
I graduated from a French engineering school, so I studied physics and chemistry, nothing related to computer. But while I was a student there, I worked on the students' website, and that's how I went into, hacking PHP BB, which happened to be written in PHP, like many people. And basically, that's how I ended up, really this world and working in that world. So after my studies, I created a company, and I built this company for like 8 years with a small team. We're up to 10. We were selling some SaaS product, which was built in PHP. So that's where I also improved my skills. I wrote a framework of mine, etc. And so at some point, this story was over and I was looking for some opportunity. And that's where, when I met, Fabian, saying I'm on the market, and I joined Sensual the day after.
Oh wow! There you go. So straight into the Symfony world there. Had you done any Symfony stuff prior to that? Then in the startup company?
No, never. I didn't know Symfony before.
So you met the boss one day, and he gave you a job the next.
Not exactly like that, because I knew Fabian from before. Because I met him at some French conferences, so like twice. And we also happened to have the same background, at least the last year in school, in the student school, in the university, was like some entrepreneurship year. And we did the same program. So we are alumni of the same program. That's also how I met Fabian.
Oh, okay. But you were studying science and engineering before. So you've got kind of an analytical and scientific brain then, I guess.
Yes, I guess so.
That's awesome. And so, any other languages? So, like, obviously, you picked up PHP, when it came from, doing the school website, or doing the websites and whatnot. Have you forayed into any other languages in your career, or has it primarily been PHP then that you've kind of, honed your craft in?
So I mostly worked in PHP. I did some JavaScript. Because part of my framework was written in JavaScript. So that was before the modern JavaScript, but that was still nice. I liked it a lot. And no, I didn't do much other languages. Some C at school, at the university, but just basic things.
First time into the Symfony language or Symfony framework was then, first day on the job for it. What was kind of your role there when you first started?
Fabian had this idea of, building a profiler at that time. So he was building the team to make the product and the ID into a concrete product. So that was not Blackfire at that time, but There was one engineer for Sensei Labs doing some prototyping on the ID, and then I entered the team, and we actually created the engineering team, to build what is nowadays Blackfire. So that's the project I've been hired for.
It's interesting you mentioned Blackfire. It's a product that I use a fair amount, and I really enjoy it. So what are the kind of day-to-day challenges that you have with running Blackfire? What kind of problems do you have to solve, and what does Blackfire give me as a user that maybe other profiling tools don't?
Oh, sure. So there are several aspects to the question. On Blackfire side, I'm not working for Blackfire anymore since January, so I'm focused on Symfony almost only now. I do some consulting for the engineering team on the Blackfire side, of course. On the day-to-day thing, balancing open source versus not open source, it's quite difficult. I'm lucky to have Fabian allow me to work on, open source as much as I want. So for now, like these days, I'm in a hurry to finish the 4.2 release. So I'm almost 80% of my time on open source. And then on some other moments in the release cycle, I'm just not doing open source because I'm just focused on something else. So it goes back and forth without much scheduling on my side. Then about Blackfire, so it's an awesome profiler. So it does. I think the main selling point of Blackfire is that it's so easy to use. You just install it once. Of course, there are some steps to install it, but once it's installed, it just works, and it works forever. I installed it 3 years ago on my laptop, and I didn't change anything to have it work every day. And even if I forget that it's there, the day I need it is just there. I just run, a Blackfire command, or just click this profile button on the Blackfire extension, and I get the result immediately. And then, of course, the view is awesome. And yeah, I'm using it on Symfony quite a lot to improve the performance and to review the patches and everything that people contribute to Symfony to make it faster. I couldn't do that without the tool. So
yeah, it's very hard to without any stats and any benchmarks. It's hard to kind of gauge, whether this performance boost, or if something is actually going to be impactful to everyone, or if it's specific cases or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. So performance is not a guesswork, and we do guesswork too often. In the performance, like this patch is going to improve performance, but actually, when you don't measure anything, you don't have any proof, and it might be false actually.
That's exactly it, yeah. So you say, kind of like you switch between open source and then your day-to-day work and stuff. So do you do that yourself then, or is that different tasks? So obviously you've got a release coming up now, so you're, all hands on deck with Symfony. And then would it blend into then doing other work, or do you have kind of strict, like, I'm going to work on open source, say half the week, and then work, other work the other half of the week, not typically? How do you partition that and kind of in your brain, being able to switch between contexts like that?
It's not easy. So I don't have strict schedule because it's, for me at least, it's difficult to be focused on some difficult topic and switch because time has come to switch. So when I have a bug, let's say on Symfony, and it's difficult, I need to get focused and to stay focused for as many hours as I need to actually understand it and fix it, because otherwise it would be just lost time. So then I have like objectives, we talk with Fabian and with the team, and we say we want to achieve this and this and this. So these are, running tasks, and I try to allow as much time as needed to actually achieve the target. So that's how I work on that.
And how do you divvy up then? Because you say they're bugs then, so it's bugs and new features. In the Symfony world, and like dealing with pull requests and things, because pull requests will come in, I'm sure, at any time and stuff, and being able to deal with them at, kind of a good clip. Do you just kind of, if you've got a bug on the, important bug, then it will just be kind of all hands on deck dealing with that, and then someone else will deal with the, the pull requests, like, or are you kind of dealing with the social side of things as well, talking to the community, etc., through pull requests and the GitHub, etc.?
So the list on the list of pull requests and the list of issues in GitHub is like this, to-do list. And it's a bit scary to see this list increase and go over to, like, let's say 200 pull requests. So this is kind of a pressure I get on me, like, wow, this number is getting too high. I need to have a look. I need to help people move forward with a pull request. Basically, that's how I see my job on this side, saying, okay, now enough pull requests and enough people actually are just stacking there, waiting for someone to care about them. So maybe I can help. So from time to time, I try to have a look and help people. And when this number goes higher, I try to give it a higher priority. That's how I do it. Then sometime, not always, I have something to work on my own, like some idea I want to push, and so some code to write. So in this moment, I don't look at pull request at all. I just write my own thing and make my own things, my own ideas move forward. That's it. And I switch from that to that because I don't have ideas all the time. So it's good because in between I can help people and go back.
That's it, yeah.
That's how it works.
No, I like that. And I think, yeah, you're all right. And, it's the way you're thinking that, someone's put the time in, you want to help them and either push the idea along or change it in the way that it needs to be changed to actually get accepted or, move in the right direction for it. If things just stand still and this number just becomes unwieldy, it's like an email inbox, just ridiculous amounts. It's just too hard to comprehend.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you support then perhaps if a developer makes a pull request and the code is not up to standard at all? What would your first kind of response to that developer be?
Oh, I try to thank them first because, someone took the time to actually suggest a change. Of course, there are obvious things like, looking at the CI when there are tests that are read. So I try to remind people to have a look there. When people don't add any test, I try to ask them politely to please add, tests, of course. And then, it's like iteration. You provide the first commands. It can be just code style on the first iterations because that's the easiest thing to review, You look at something and you say, this is okay, this is not. This is very quick. And slowly we get deeper and deeper into the topic up to the point where sometimes I can, challenge the core idea or the way it's done. But then it's for the discussion. I mean, it's really interesting to understand why people are submitting that. And at some moment, in some pull request, we decide together, the community, the other reviewers and the author, that this is not the good approach and we need another one, which we drafted in the comments. So yeah, that's for the most difficult topics. And sometimes it's just easy. So we try to improve that.
Yeah, because they could have come back with a solution, but maybe their solution's not right, but the problem they have could be valid. So yeah, with your domain expertise, you could then work through it. And so it's been valuable that they brought it to the table as a starting point.
Correct. So sometimes, for example, I remember on the cache component, someone came with a pull request with, some problem and the code to actually solve it. And that was, sometimes I do a competing pull request. So that I remember something like that on the cache component where, this pull request was explaining well the problem, but the solution was totally not what I would do for technical reasons. So I did it. And then what happened was awesome because the contributor switched to my own pull request and, challenged it a lot. So in the end, we merged my pull request, but his contribution was really included into it.
Yeah, because you distill it down into like the kind of, this is, both of you working together. It's not a competition on who's going to get, the rewards out of it. It's really like, there's the problem and how we're going to solve it together. And I suppose that must be another thing, dealing with the community and not hurting people's feelings or trying not to hurt people's feelings. And kind of, code is a very personal thing to people. So if someone comes with something, dealing with it in a nice way. And I think, the way you mentioned, how you deal with like the styling first, and you can kind of slowly get through to, okay, maybe we can tweak this a bit, and maybe we can change like, some fundamentals on how you solved it. But no, it's interesting. And it must be a challenging every day because obviously a new pull request comes in and they're all different.
Yes.
So a bit of a silly question because I think I already know the answer, but what parts of Symfony do you actually work on then? Is it everything?
I'm doing a tour of Symfony components. So I worked on the var dumper component. Actually, I wrote it. It's extracting from my previous work in my previous company. So that's maybe maybe the first component I contributed to Symfony. I created the cache component also. Then I worked a lot on the debug component, on the dependency injection one. You may have heard about the routing improvements last winter. So that's, my routing tool component. So yeah, those are the components I think I know the most and the best. For the current cycle, I've been having a look at, the translation component, the messenger component, and I don't know form. I don't know validation. I really don't know how to use them. I mean, yeah, okay, but I don't know. But the serializer, I don't know also how it works. And the good thing is that I don't go into these areas because there are people caring about them a lot already.
It's wasted cycles, isn't it? There's no point in you kind of taking invested interest. Someone else is going to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's quite comforting, actually, because I often think that as a user of Symfony, I should probably know these bits and pieces. But if even you don't know all of the components, and you're happily saying that you don't know the components, then that makes me feel a little bit better about myself as well. So what are you most proud of with your contributions to Symfony?
I think the most critical feature of Symfony is the deprecation policy and the way we are now able to create a migration path, a continuous migration path between major releases. From Symfony 1 to Symfony 2, you had to rewrite everything. But from 2 to 3 and from 3 to 4 and 4 to 5, etc., it's just easy. I mean, it's just a few hours. And I worked a lot on that. And I think that's, like a superpower for Symfony. And I played a role into contributing it to Symfony. So I think that's the thing I'm the most proud of.
I think that's the most invaluable thing about Symfony. And it's one of the hardest things in the project, to deal with this, legacy code and moving code along. It's not as simple all the time. It's just, we'll do a rewrite. That may be easy for the framework for people just to have to rewrite. But yeah, having to challenge and work through, dealing with the decisions. And I suppose then actually that makes the decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis with what you put into a component, how you design your APIs and stuff, very hard and kind of like well thought out, because this is going to be lasting a long time. This will be around for a long time.
Yeah, so the good thing is that we can do mistakes, we can do short-term decisions. If we are able to deprecate them, that's fine. So that's how Symfony is going to be alive for years to come, because we are able to just drop the old code, the old components, and we are still able to innovate. So without that, Symfony would just,
just stagnate, wouldn't it? Sadly, yeah.
Stack crap, and in the end just die because of its own weight, like a black hole, so that we're free from that.
So does that mean then that there's a kind of clear roadmap for Symfony moving forward? Is there a clear vision that you have, or is there a lot of ad hoc changes to the direction that the project moves in?
Yeah, there is no roadmap. Symfony has only one roadmap, which is time-based releasing, which means we ship what's ready every 6 months. And every 2 years now, we ship a new major release where the only thing we do is just dropping the deprecated code. There is no roadmap. We might, each of us, have ideas about where Symfony should be improved. But if nobody writes the code, it's okay. I mean, we did something else in between. So that's how it works.
Sure. And so for people that wanted maybe to get involved and create new features or take up some of the features that are being discussed, is there a central place where people can go to find out what needs to be done? Is there a voting system for anything that needs to be implemented, etc.?
So there are tens of ways to contribute to Symfony. About the code, I would recommend to go to the issue tracker. The most recent issues are usually the most the easiest to fix, because on the opposite side, the oldest one are old for a reason. I mean, nobody either took the time to actually dive into them, or they're just so hard to fix. So yeah, looking at the most recent one. Another way to contribute would be to enter contributing would be to, think about these sentences where you would expect Symfony to behave in some way, or you would expect Symfony like, hey, we have been waiting this for a year. That's the kind of comment we get sometimes when we release a new feature. Hey, what were you doing, guys? Our people. Hey, we were just waiting for you to contribute it. So if you have this moment, or this kind of moment where you're saying, hey, what were you doing, guys? Maybe you should be the one doing the pull request to make it actually happen.
Exactly. It would spark up the conversation, and, it's all win, really, isn't it? I think people feel scared to maybe try and, think, oh, will my code actually be valuable? But even if it just starts the conversation up and the code gets changed, you're going to have a valuable learning experience working with yourself and everyone else on the Symfony core team and all the other contributors. It's just a win-win to help contribute to these types of projects.
Sure. I mean, I've read some blog posts about, the experience of contributing to Symfony that some people shared, and they learned a lot. That's basically the most common feedback I get from people that contribute and that enter contributing for the first time. If they have the passions to comment and contribute to the discussion, then everyone learns a lot, both Symfony, because we learned about a new problem and we figured out maybe a solution, and the author. Usually people enter with some, code that is written from their own point of view, and then other people will give their own point of view of the discussion. And in the end, everything is going to be much better. Not because it's not something that is achievable on the first pull request. I mean, even an experienced contributor always comes with his or their own bias.
No, absolutely. And I think actually for the audience, primarily this podcast is for PHP developers. So the component ecosystem and the way things are broken out into components and the way that they enable different rates of change and stuff. Like, when did that come into being? Like, how valuable has that been to be able to keep the project moving forward and, kind of being able to, have, because you say, certain parts of the system or certain components of the system, but, there's other parts that you don't know and you can just leave to other people.
So Symfony is just 40 or about 40 components. Each of them can be used standalone. Many people do use them standalone. I'm surprised all the time. Even the dependency injection component is used by people standalone. So sometimes, people talk about, I'm a Symfony developer. It means something. It means, I suppose, that people are using like the framework bundle and then the bundle system to, wire and configure a single application. But then there are people that are also Symfony developers, but they are just using the routing component or just the cache component or just the DI components, like I said. So it means Symfony is completely integrated into the PHP ecosystem to me. I mean, there is no difference between the Symfony world and the PHP world. It's just one world, and Symfony contributes some components that you can mash up with components from, other people that are not in the Symfony namespace. But that's fine. That's awesome, actually.
Yeah, because you can just hit new ideas and new solutions to things.
Yeah, and I imagine it must be very satisfying as well for you to see the Symfony components being used in so many other projects and frameworks.
Sure. That's a great reason to contribute to Symfony. I mean, by contributing to Symfony, the impact is much higher than any other project you could contribute to, I suppose. I mean, that's my own contributions. I could do them in my own namespace, on my own, vendor, but they wouldn't have the same impact. So Symfony is just an awesome impact or awesome vector for code.
Well, it comes with a prestige, doesn't it? And it would be interesting. How do you decide what becomes a component and what goes into a component? And also, you mentioned there that all these components can be used outside of the Symfony framework, kind of ecosystem. Is that intentional? That all these components should be able to be used outside of Symfony where possible?
Yes, that's from day one of Symfony 2. Symfony 2 is designed as a collection of standalone components. So that's from day one, and that's why Symfony has been adopted by so many projects. Like, we have a Symfony component in Magento, in Typo 3, in Drupal, in Easy Publish, in Laravel, and etc. So, and they just use a few of them, a few components, and that's fine. That's perfect, actually. That's just how we want it to be, being able to contribute just a few solutions to some generic problem. So then how does something become a component? I don't know precisely, but maybe at the moment where someone figures out a scope, a domain where we can contribute a few classes and interfaces, and they play well together and they solve a problem.
So it kind of just comes naturally, from the problem you're in, like, breaking up the problem and how they can be, separated, and where different rates of change can occur.
Yep. So, and there's another trigger I'm just thinking of. It's also driven by what we want to achieve within the framework bundle ecosystem. Let's say the messenger component is something that existed before or exists outside of the Symfony namespace, but by having it, having this feature right into Symfony, it allows us to build much faster and much stronger on the feature provided by the messenger component, like message buses and things like that. So that now it will be easier to and better integrated to deal with this kind of buses.
Actually, one of the questions that I've had in my mind a few times when I think about Symfony is wondering how it relates to frameworks in other languages. For example, you have sort of Django in Python and Spring in Java and stuff. So is there any established framework in another language that Symfony really borrows its ideas from, or is the Symfony project paving its own path?
I know that from the beginning, let's say the security subsystem has been inspired a lot by the Spring one. So the architecture is, borrowed from the Spring framework. But now, it's like 5 or 8 years ago that happened. So recently, I don't know any major borrowing from other technologies, but we do look at, Django or Spring or other when we want to solve something. Let's say auto wiring, for example. That's something I've been looking at in the Spring world to see how they do annotations, how they do auto wiring, what kind of sub concepts exist there, so that I could take inspiration from there. If there was something to borrow, it's better to not invent and make the mistake ourselves. We can just take the ideas there.
Sure, I understand. Yeah. From what I've seen, Symfony is a lot more popular in Europe than it is maybe in America. I think South America has quite a wide usage of Symfony from what I've seen. Is that, why do you think maybe it is that North America favors Laravel over Symfony, or appears to at least? And is that something that maybe could be addressed, or is there any need to address that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
So I don't have the answer. I'm wondering myself. I'm wondering why and how actually we could have Symfony have a much higher impact in the US. I am asking the US community to help us answer this question. That's the only way I can answer this question is by asking people there and asking them to help us, create more noise around Symfony to have it, like a hipster thing. So Symfony has a lot of traction in Europe. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's another point of view, which is the technical point of view. In Europe, maybe in France, I'm sure, we have a technical point of view on things like frameworks, We like well-designed things, and we like building on top of design building blocks like solid principle and things like that. In the US, for sure, I feel like people like to have something that just works. They don't really care about how it works. They just want to make it work faster. So time to market is much important for people that actually code than I feel like it's in France. That's maybe a difference that explains something.
When you say the popularity, obviously, in America compared to Europe, do you mean, because I think that's where people maybe get confused with Symfony. As you say, Symfony is both the components. So you're using a component. Hey, I use Symfony. Hey, I can, kind of work and collaborate and help improve that component that I'm using. I've got a vested interest in it. Whereas Symfony, the bundles dealing with, actually using it. Where do you want, where do you see kind of that can be spearheaded on in America and kind of other countries? Is it the use of Symfony as the framework or Symfony as the components or both?
I think Symfony as the framework is what we mean by Symfony is successful or not. I mean, with Symfony 4, I expect people to have a much lower learning curve, a much smoother learning curve so that maybe people could enter using the framework like Flex, the skeleton, much easier and get things done much faster. So that could help drive some adoption there.
Absolutely. And other frameworks, obviously like Laravel, is a big one. And that uses Symfony components from day one, or, very early on it used Symfony components. And how has, the other frameworks in the PHP ecosystem kind of helped aid Symfony? And is there a lot of collaboration goes on there? Or is it, it's nice to have that competition in some friendly competition to be able to kind of, work and progress and move forward.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cross-pollination, like sharing ideas between Laravel and Symfony in both directions. And that happens also with other technologies, other frameworks. That's great. I mean, that's why I like open source so much, because ideas are not copyrighted and everyone can borrow the good ideas from someone else and make everything better. And it's also fine to disagree with a group. That's also why, competition is nice, because the people that do Laravel, they disagree with some ways, with the way Symfony does some things. And that's awesome because it allows exploring some area we wouldn't be able to explore ourselves, because we have our own way of seeing the world. And it means we are exploring our own set of ideas. And in the end, when they end up, or reciprocally, when we end up having ideas that they can find or we can find nice, it's just time to borrow and to go to the next step together.
Absolutely. You just don't want the silos, do you? There's just no point, as you say, silos mean that projects end up just staying stale and they never move forward and they never see the bigger picture or how someone else can see it. So if you can have this good discussion with other frameworks, whether it's in the same language or different languages, it values everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And so what actually are you working on at the moment then? Because I know you did the Symfony Cash talk at Symfony Live, and you've recently come back from Symfony conference in San Francisco.
So these days I'm working on the Messenger component. I don't know if you saw the pull request I've submitted recently, but I've submitted like 8 or 10 of them. And that's because I didn't review the component since its beginning. And we are going to release Photo 2 at the end of November. So it's going to be released as stable. And I really wanted to have a look. So I did have a look and I submitted some pull requests. So now I know the components and I hope it's going to be stable soon.
So the Messenger component actually is a really big, kind of interesting component. Would you mind maybe for the audience kind of explaining briefly what that actually does?
Yeah, sure. The Messenger component is as a middleware stack. So you basically, there's one entry point to the component, which is a dispatch method. It's just a method. You call it, you give an object as argument, which is called a message, and you just dispatch a message. And then the component is all about what happens after this call. And what happens is that there is a stack of middleware that are called in chain. And so the last middleware is usually the middleware or that calls the handlers, which are the callback, basically, that do something with a message. But in between, the stack is wired with typically a transport layer so that we can move a message from the stack to a queue and to some network protocol, So we send the message to AMQP, And then there is a receiver part which receives the message far away, on another machine, where a PHP worker, is listening and, listening for the messages and sending them back to the handler, this callback thing. And all of this happens in the same application. There's a command line to launch a long-running worker on the remote side, and on the client side, we just dispatch the message and everything happens without you having to care. So it can be synchronous or asynchronous depending on the way you configure your infrastructure. That's also the great thing. In dev, you don't have all this setup. It still works. And in prod, you just change the configuration. And thanks to this transport thing, the message goes far away and, response time is much higher or faster.
Yeah, and it's a really good abstraction to kind of have, and because obviously, so one thing actually Fabian did at the keynote in the Symfony Live London was to talk about Symfony Mailer, and one of the things it could do then was take advantage of this Symfony Messenger, and he mentioned the Symfony Messenger being a very key vital part going forward. How do you think something like Symfony Messenger is going to help kind of pave the way for the future of how we kind of develop things in Symfony world, and also just in general kind of like think of these things as messages passing through?
Yeah, that's big change in the way we can think about messages and dealing with input, basically, because many input can be thought of just a message that comes in and that we could just send to a bus, and the bus does something with the message. So the mailer is the one that Fabian is working on and that leverages the messenger component. I'm sure we are going to have more ideas, and the community will contribute more use cases for the messenger components.
So Ed mentioned a moment ago that you obviously spoke at Symfony Live in London, and then more recently in San Francisco. And I think a lot of your time is taken up with conference speaking and attendance, if I'm correct. So are you as excited now as you were when you first started speaking at conferences, or do you find maybe that the shine rubs off a little, and how much of your time is given towards conference attendance and speaking and teaching?
So autumn is a quite busy period for me because we have all the Symfony Live and Symfony Con conferences in the autumn. We are going to create more conferences. We are working on more conferences that should happen next spring. So I'm going to be busy next spring, I suppose, if everything goes well. About being excited, yes, I am, for every conference. And the thing I'm most excited about is meeting people. We work a lot with contributors on GitHub and on Slack also. But, it's like an electronic communication. It's very basic. And I really enjoy meeting the people that I work with on Slack and on GitHub. And at every conference, there are people that are working with me and with others on Symfony. So that's a big part of that's a big reason why I'm excited to go at conferences. And of course, meeting people that are new to Symfony is also very exciting. They can just share their experience, and I'm very eager to listen to that.
I don't think I've ever seen you at a conference without a smile on your face. So how do you manage the time that you spend traveling to conferences? Are you busy working all the time whilst you're traveling, or do you maybe sort of get to a city and then kick back for a while, or does it impact a lot on the amount of work that you can get done?
So I like hacking on Symfony. So I like opening the laptop even offline and contribute, experiment some ideas. I have a to-do list, my own to-do list. It's my own roadmap for the day. I be able to do that. So I look at that in the plane and I say, what can I experiment with today in the plane? So that's how I can experiment sometimes. Then when I travel, it's just balancing between having a rest and being available for others and working on the code. And I try to sleep as much as I can because it's exhausting, be available, and do some contributions, basically trying to balance that to have it, healthy.
How many people actually work full time then on Symfony? Because I know that you mentioned obviously you and Fabian. Are there any others that kind of spend most of their time, paid time, working on the Symfony framework and Symfony components?
As far as I know, there is only me and Fabian that have, paid time on Symfony. So Fabian, of course, it's not, he's his own boss, so that's okay. He decides. And I'm the only one I'm aware of that works paid time on official paid time on Symfony. So everyone else is contributing on their available time whenever they want. And actually, that's the majority of the contributions are done like that. I'm just holding a minor contribution to Symfony.
We were helping keep the ship running and keep, things moving, as you say, like getting pull requests. I mean, this is such invaluable stuff. Like, pull requests would just stay there stagnant, and you need people to have interest in them and direct them in the right way and stuff. And, definitely. I think you're doing an invaluable service.
Yeah.
You mentioned actually, like a little while ago, you don't have a roadmap, like a, kind of published roadmap of what Symfony or where Symfony is going to be going, but you have your own personal, I'm sure, kind of thoughts and, the things that you want to hack on, things you're interested in. For you then, kind of where do you see, the growth in Symfony and the changes that you would like to make in your own personal time compared to, like, obviously pull requests that come up from other people?
Or
is it all secret?
No, it's not secret, but I don't take any engagement on having them happen, So whatever I'm going to say, it's maybe not going to happen anytime. So that's just random talk. So I like working on the Symfony Contracts. I really like the Symfony Contracts package we're going to release in November. And I think we have a good opportunity with there to provide some abstractions. Very simple ones. That's a core requirement for me. And we could help Symfony basically, and everyone in the PHP world also, by defining how the caching domain can be, made simple with this cache interface I talk about in my talk. But there are more interfaces that I'd like to have in a generic and abstract way. I'm not sure I can share much ideas on that topic because they don't exist and it's a sensitive topic.
No, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. Well, when you mean Symfony Contracts then that's coming, what do you mean by those?
So Symfony Contracts is a set of interfaces. There are sub-namespaces, and each sub-namespace holds a domain, and the domain is like cache, like I said, with like 3 interfaces there and some doc blocks explaining that these are implementing these interfaces means covering a domain, the caching domain, in the way it's specified. There are some interfaces in the service namespace to help to generalize the concept of service subscribers, which doesn't have to be a Symfony specific thing. So I like it. What else? There is the translation interface. And this is also very generic, just an interface with this trans method. And if you happen to need a translation system, you just need this interface. And of course, there is one implementation, which is the Symfony translation component. But if you don't need this implementation and you want your own, it's perfectly doable, thanks to the interface.
And that's that's when you have good abstractions and seeing how and it all distills down, and it takes time, as you say, to work through them to come to this. And that's where, obviously the thought and, the kind of thinking behind it all and everything comes in.
Yeah. So it forces also us to, from the Symfony point of view, to design things in a maintainable way and decoupled way. And this is not something we want to do for the engineering nice, part of it. It's because it's actually helping a lot on the maintenance side, both for the framework, the core team point of view, and the application, the consumer, let's say, point of view.
The different rates of change, how different people want to work on different things. You have to have good abstractions and good, kind of context that you can be working in, and good APIs, well built APIs that that you can have in these contracts. So absolutely, it's not just because it looks good, because it's pure and everything, it's got an amazing domain and whatnot. It's actually practical knowledge. I think that's what I love about the component system and how Symfony has been built, is it's using this and applying these in such a practical way that you can really see the value in why you would break up a system in this way. And it's a very good use case to kind of show, hey, this is practically how it would work and why it works. And that's that's why, I can understand certain parts of the system without having to worry, and it won't break other parts of the system because we've had these good, clear boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, like you said, it's applicable knowledge and examples about things that are abstract, like solid principle. It's a bit abstract when you teach them, but now it's actually required to have a successful Symfony stack.
Definitely. And you see it. And you see the fact that, if Symfony was so tied together with these components, you wouldn't get the value. You wouldn't get the people working on it, from other frameworks, because if I can't use this in another context or in another, project, then you wouldn't get as much input and as much feedback from other people, working on different, components, because everyone's going to be working on what they need to work on to solve their problem.
That raises a point, actually. I mean, how important is PHP Fig standards to Symfony and getting interoperability?
Yeah, they are important, and not all of them are applicable to Symfony. That's the two sides of the answer. PSR, this number, PSR 0, PSR 3, 1, 2, 5, 4, 6, etc., etc. Some of them are applicable to Symfony components, and we leverage them as much as we can. The PSR 6 standard is a great one, the PSR 0, the PSR 4 for auto-loading. So we try to borrow as much as possible and to leverage as much as possible when they're applicable to Symfony. There are PSRs that are not applicable to Symfony, like PSR 7 and related PSRs like 15, 17, maybe 18th, the next one. These are not applicable to Symfony because they require a different stack, like a different framework that is just not compatible with the way Symfony works internally. So this is not for Symfony. That's fine. I mean, that's why we don't use all standards on Earth, and there are some standards that just nobody uses, and others that are successful. That's the life of a standard, I suppose. So yeah, the Fig is great. Your question, I suppose, relates also to Symfony Contracts. And so Symfony Contracts has a different pace than the PHP Fig. The way Symfony Contracts are designed is by reviews and discussions that happen on GitHub with a core team and with the experience that we have and the principles that we have, so that we can release also with this time-based release schedule. And all of this fits really well the way we know how to write code in the Symfony community. The Fig is so different that, it's difficult, and I think the Fig doesn't have exactly the same goals as Symfony. In Symfony, we want just to ship solutions to actual problems and to ship them now in the best way we can, but we also want to ship them. The Fig can take as many years as it wants to actually figure out the most generic way to solve a topic, a domain, which is fine. That's really fine, but that's just not the pace of Symfony. So if there are new standards in the future that compete with Symfony Contracts, I hope we'll be able to actually incorporate them into Symfony Contracts somehow. Like, actually, it's the case for PSR 6, which is just a lower layer of the cache contracts.
That really is cool. And thank you, Nicolas. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. It was really, really interesting. I've got one last question. So I know, you spend most of your life in the PHP world, but outside of the PHP world or any other paradigms, like, what else intrigues you at the moment, kind of in the, computer science, kind of realm, functional programming, AI, ML, kind of what things get you, interested at this time?
I need to have a look at AI and machine learning and things like that. I didn't have a look. So right now, if there were two languages, I would choose like TypeScript or Go. I mean, they are both really interesting. I don't know the other one very well, but I think Go and TypeScript are really interesting because of what they provide, like a new way of doing things.
Awesome. Well, audience, it's been another great episode, and I say thank you, Neal, for co-hosting today, and also Nicolas for being on the show. It's been absolutely, amazing kind of hearing, and I think, getting this kind of insight into how Symfony works and like the people behind the framework. Until next week, goodbye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com. Or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.